Here's our panel of experts. We're going to go through the agenda today before I hand over the presentation to Dan. So we're going to start off with some information around the millennials. What makes them different from some of the generations that are in the workplace today? We want to know why is it that retention of these millennials is so critical in today's workplace. And a way to do that, of course, is to have a little bit better understanding of some of the competencies and behavioral aspects of this new generation. And then we're going to take that knowledge and transition it to Ryan Smith's expertise from the field, sharing a little bit of some of his lessons for the hiring, retention, and the managing of millennial workers. And finally, we're going to wrap those up with some of the key takeaways that this presentation has provided. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Dan, who's going to help us understand a little bit more about the millennials in our workplace today. Dan, take it away.
Thank you very much. So I want to kick this off to kind of showcase all the stereotypes, the negative stereotypes that millennials have encountered for the past 5 or so years. What's really interesting is these are the same stereotypes that baby boomers had when they were entering the workforce. Both generations have been called the me generation. You saw this was 2 years ago on the cover of Time magazine, the me generation, and then the Asian version of Time magazine was It's All About Me. But if you look at the numbers, you'll see that there's a lot of positive attributes of millennials that prove these to be wrong. So 84% of people say that millennials say that helping to make a positive difference in the world is more important than professional recognition. These are individuals who are focused on meaningful work, giving back to society, and they want to align their values with that of a company that is doing the right thing and not just trying to make more money. 41% of millennials do what their managers tell them to do, which is greater than older generations. A lot of people think that millennials are entitled, but because of the bad economy, it's forced millennials to kind of reassess their situation and kind of learn the rules of the road in the workplace and view their managers as their top mentors, not just their parents. And 45% believe that a decent paying job is a privilege. Any millennial who has a job will tell you that they're getting messages day in, day out from their friends who don't have jobs and who are still living with their parents or siblings. So they're struggling, and it makes millennials appreciate the fact that they actually have a job even more because of this bad economy. So if you compare generations, millennials are the largest generation at 80 million. We have them, millennials being born 1982 to 1993. Gen Y or digital natives or millennials, they all mean the same thing, just so you know, because people get confused about those terms, but they're interchangeable. Their core values, they're very optimistic, but now even more realistic. They're very confident about the future, but they understand that they're probably not going to get Social Security, and their view of retirement is completely different than other generations. They don't think that it's possible for them to retire. A lot of that has to do with the economy. A lot of it has to do with people living longer now, and a lot of them are, again, looking to maximize their potential. They're extremely competitive. That's why gamification in the workplace works really well, because they want to compete against their peers and they want to be rewarded. They're very into rewards and recognition. They're the most diverse generation we've ever had. They see education as an expense. A lot of them are starting to pull away and deciding not to go to school or not to go to graduate school because of how much money school is and the fact that there's so much more free online content and courses that didn't exist in the past that has now enabled them to get an education for little to no cost. They're all about continuous learning. They understand that things get outdated very quickly in this society, and that's all about real-time communication and always checking to see what the latest trends are. And because of their use of and understanding of technology, this has become part of how they learn and develop themselves. And they changing jobs is really a usual routine, and we'll get into that more. And they are all about flexibility and work-life integration, not work-life balance like older generations, because they don't think that they can achieve that. And we'll also talk about that very important topic. The future is millennials. They're the majority of the workplace percentage-wise compared to Gen X and baby boomers as of this year. What you're going to see this year and the upcoming 5 years, you'll see Generation Z pop into the workplace, and millennials will have to learn how to manage them. A lot of research shows that the millennials that are becoming managers are not prepared for those positions because they've been rushed into those positions because 10,000 boomers retire every day. So there's a huge leadership gap now, and millennials are the generation that are going to have to fill it along with Gen X. But by 2025, which is 10 years from now, they'll account for 75% of the global workforce. So they're very influential in companies. A lot of companies are changing their work policies in order to please millennials and compete with them in the war for talent. And they're influencing older generations in order to use the same technology that they're using in order to interact with them. So they're having a huge impact in several fronts. One of the big things that companies are afraid of is the fact that millennials don't stay at a company very long. Every 2 years, they move from one company to the next, whereas older generations would stay at a company for more than twice the amount of time that they did. And so this can be a huge cost for companies because it costs about $20,000 to replace each millennial employee. And so if you're a larger company and you have 1,000 millennial employees and you start to lose them every few years, that could be extremely costly and really harm your organization. There's a huge generational clash in the workplace. This is why that you almost have to train and kind of engage your generations so that they understand and they understand each other and they're on the same page. Because every generation has a negative view of the upcoming generation. For instance, Gen X and Boomers, who we surveyed a few years ago, said that millennials were entitled, have poor work ethic, and are easily distracted. And millennials said that Generation Z are lazy. But every generation has a positive view of their elders, which really means that the older generations have to kind of take a step back and say, we really need to give these younger generations a chance and not feel threatened by them. So how are companies reacting? We boiled this down a few years ago into a few different programs that are really effective in harnessing the power and the intelligence of millennials while keeping them engaged so they stay with the company longer. The objective here is to maximize the productivity and value of each millennial, knowing that they won't stay at your company for 20 years. Some of the top programs are workplace flexibility programs, internal hiring programs, mentoring programs. Those are typically the most popular, and so we're going to go through some of those right now. For internal hiring, it's 1.7 times more expensive to hire externally. By hiring internally, it increases the employee morale in your company and allows your talent to develop. It makes them feel like they really have a chance at being successful in your company. And if they don't see those internal opportunities, it's very easy for them to take an offer from another company whose recruiters are hounding them on LinkedIn. Because the top talent, they get messages every single day to get interviews. The number one reason why millennials leave a company is lack of career opportunities. They're young in their careers. They're all about career growth. That is the most important thing. And so if a company can't provide those type of opportunities and are hiring and spending so much money hiring externally, then they're going to lose that talent. And the research shows that external hires are not successful compared to internal hires. Internal hires obviously have good sense of the corporation. They already have their network established. They understand business protocol. They're extremely valuable. So I urge companies to start to hire more internally. So what else do they want? Well, they want real-time feedback and mentoring. They want transparency, social media, freedom and flexibility, and community support. So these are some of the major topics that I see come up again and again. It comes up in my research, comes up in the companies that I work with. These are really the most important programs and ideas when it concerns about retaining and engaging millennial employees. So constant feedback, this is becoming more and more important because through technology, everyone wants instant communication. They want to know what's going on now, what's the latest tweet, what's the latest Facebook status update. And so if they have to wait a whole year to find out what they're doing right and what they could improve on in your company, that's not going to really engage them, and they're going to typically want to change companies or positions because of that. So they want continuous learning, and part of continuous learning is continuous feedback, real-time feedback. After a meeting, they know exactly how they did in that meeting and how they could do better. Adobe is one example of this. What they did is they abolished the annual performance review, and because of that, they've increased their retention rate, and expectations are set annually, but feedback is really given along the way. And this is the new approach that more and more companies are starting to adopt. Mentoring programs. They see career support. The reason why these younger generations have a positive view of their elders is because they need their support. They realize that they've been working at the companies longer than them and have more experience, and they want to learn as much as they can as quickly as possible. Knowledge transfer is extremely important. As 20 million baby boomers retire in the next 5 years, companies are going to need to hold on to some of that knowledge and transfer to these upcoming generations so they can lead the companies in the future. Reverse mentoring. This is pioneered by GE, and it's still important today. Tapping into the intelligence and the connectedness of younger generations, so they can help older generations understand the importance of technology, how to use the new tools that are becoming more popular, whereas older generations can help millennials and younger generations figure out how to be successful in the workplace and learn kind of the protocol for that. So both generations can come together for mutual benefit. So it's really important to pair older generations with younger generations, because then they can both realize their value, get on the same page, and help each other equally. Transparency has been a huge word, especially with social media and everything that's going on, in the world. If a disaster strikes, people are, holding a first-hand account of that disaster on social media. With politicians, they can't get away with anything anymore. That's all online. So it's created this idea of transparency in the world. Yet millennials don't trust CEOs or politicians or big companies. As even recent research study that came out last week showed the same thing, and that's what we're seeing as well. So how do you gain trust in millennials? You have to involve them in discussions that they normally wouldn't be involved in, and you have to reveal more information to them so they feel like they're special, they feel like they're included and are part of the team, and that their ideas are heard. This is really important. This is really the start of creating a flatter organization where millennial could talk to the CEO or a member of the executive team and doesn't have to wait a decade to do so. And we'll see more of that in the future, where organizations become more flat, especially with the use of technology, so that workers at the bottom level, typically the millennials, are able to connect with seasoned veterans at the top. Workplace flexibility, huge topic. We did a study on it. Millennials want the ability to work from home. They're willing to take a pay cut to work from home, and actually saves them a lot of money if they work from home or work remote at a Starbucks or a co-working space. Because millennials have less barrier between their personal and professional lives, they need some degree of flexibility, especially because in the next 5 years they're going to have a lot of children, and they're going to want to spend time with those children. And in order to do that, they need some way of getting some balance or some additional time to spend with their children. And technology allows people to work from home because, through email, of course, video conferencing, social networking, instant messaging, a lot of positions these days can be remote positions. And I'm not saying that you should let every, employee work from home like some companies do, but I am saying that, allowing someone to work from home one day a week is not going to hurt you, and it's going to help them and actually keep them more engaged. And the research shows that employees who work from home are actually more engaged in their work than those in the office. And that was from the Harvard Business Review. So more on the importance of flexible work, as you see in the study that we did in February, employees know that they have to always answer business email and phone calls from their manager or coworkers when they're outside the office. It's an expectation on them these days. The average work week is not 40 hours a week anymore. It's 49 hours a week for salaried workers and 44 hours a week for hourly workers. So people are working much more than they ever have, and there's an expectation that you're always kind of doing work or kind of on the work schedule. So because of this, companies are investing more in work flexibility programs this year because employees want to have more personal time. They don't want work to interfere with their personal lives, and that's what's happening right now. And that's kind of the con with technology. Because of all this technology, it's easier to get trapped into always working, especially if you like what you do. So flexible options is so many different things that companies do. One is they just reduce hours overall. They restructure hours. They have variable hours. They have leave options, and they have remote work, telecommuting, which is typically the most popular. And just to sum this all up, with the future of work, hours are not going to be confined to 9 to 5. They really aren't anymore because no one really works on that schedule. So you're just going to be working you're just going to be focusing on the work and the results of that work instead of when and how and where you do that work. Technology will embrace at all levels. Technology will create, a flatter organization. As you see here, hierarchies will flatten because it's really getting everyone on the same page. There's a reason why, when you use Twitter, you can tweet to a celebrity or a CEO because they all have the same basic privileges on Twitter. They all have Twitter profiles, and they all can tweet publicly just like you can, and you can tweet at them. And so the technology has really put everyone on the same plane. And companies will have to focus more on the why, not just the what. So, you got to give employees a greater purpose so they feel more engaged in their work and they feel like they can make a difference. And showing them the impact of the work they do on a daily basis and how that benefits the group, the company, and customers and the world at large is really going to help motivate them to stay with your company longer and work harder for you. And then projects and people are greater than location. So when we asked millennials and Gen Z what gives them the most creativity, what makes them the most productive, they said that the people they work with are really important, and those people need to be highly motivated and experts in their field, and then the projects they work on have to be connected to their strengths and their passions, and that's way more important than where they work. So you need to focus on getting the right people. The best retention strategy is the best recruiting strategy. Getting the right people who fit in the culture in the beginning, allow them to do the work that they're really good at, and then hire just the best people so they're motivated to become that good or just stay at your company to learn from them. And the future is millennials. They're the majority of the workplace this year. Their influence is growing. Understanding how they operate now is going to really help you in recruiting and retaining them. And to find out more information about workplacetrends.com, you can go to workplacetrends.com. And I have my book, Promote Yourself, if you'd like to read that as well. I'd like to thank you for your time. Now we're going to proceed to the next part of the presentation.
Great, thank you, Dan. This is Michelle Cozen, and I'd like to dive into some applied expertise now and build on these great millennial insights by talking about really specific lessons learned for hiring, retaining, and managing this generation in the workforce. So for most, diving into the world of talent assessment data and workforce analytics is really driven by a need to solve business challenges and achieve those key corporate goals. So even though initiatives and concerns vary, what they really all have in common is focusing on really getting people within an organization performing better and how to decode that human capital potential to achieve more. So how can they find the right people? How can they put them in the right roles? How can they develop stronger leaders and higher performing teams? So using talent assessments with your workforce really makes the difference between data-driven decisions about people versus more gut feel hiring and development activities. And the analytics from behavior and skill assessments help you get those insights about your people, whether it's teams or individuals, and that insight absolutely drives the business results that you're seeing here on the slide. And I just wanted to share a few examples about how our clients leverage talent assessment data and the benefits that it brings to their overall organizations. And so we have, better retention, stronger cultures, increased productivity, overall growth, cost savings, risk mitigation, much more. So today what we want to share with you is just how powerful this connection is between behavioral traits and job performance and organizational success. So at PI Worldwide, we have a methodology that combines technology, data, knowledge transfer, and consulting to help put analytics into action in organizations of all shapes and sizes, and to really help them with all those key people decisions across the employee life cycle. So to bring this into focus and talk in more detail as to what's possible, I'd like to welcome Ryan from Radius. He's the President and Chief Strategy Officer to help us learn more about how they've leveraged workforce analytics in their growing organization. Ryan?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, this is a great transition into what I'm going to talk about today. So when it comes to managing millennials, Radius, we actually have a lot of experience in that. About half of our workforce is of the millennial generation, actually a little bit over half. We've had a lot of great success. We've actually, for the first 3.5 years of our company, we actually had 100% employee retention, which is a little bit unusual, as Dan talked about during his presentation. So we've had a lot of success in both hiring, managing, and developing, and retaining millennials, and we've done that through using a lot of things. But if I had to pinpoint one X factor for our success, it's been the behavior assessment and behavior analysis and some of those human analytics that we get through working with predictive index. So first and foremost, let's talk about what Radius is. Radius is a digital marketing agency. We're out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We specialize in creating remarkable content that leads to remarkable results. So what does all that mean? What does our company look like? Well, we're staffed similar to a newsroom. That's really the foundation of what our company was built on to create content. So we have writers, editors, designers, producers, videographers, creatives, account managers, community managers, strategists. That's what makes up Radius. A lot of our creatives are the millennial generation, but we also have millennials who have worked their way up out of entry-level roles into leadership roles and function every day, leading our company and leading some of our largest clients that we work with. We work with some of the biggest brands in the world, and the fact that we are able to entrust those relationships and that work to the millennial generation is really unique, and it's really great. How have we gone about doing that is through a rock-solid hiring process, making sure that we have a management structure and system that pretty much falls right in line with everything that Dan talked about with what millennials want and need in a workplace and for their careers, and that's how we've gotten them to stay. So an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about our hiring process first, how we end up doing that, because at the beginning of the day, our hiring process is what helps us ultimately manage and develop our talent by making the right hire in the first place. We're going to talk about how we manage, and if we have some time, we might talk about our executives, but we'll probably skip over that at this point. So our hiring process, it's actually pretty simple. It's a 6-step process with a lot of caveats in between, but if we're talking about how we start our hiring process, it starts with a 100% foolproof job description. So what is a foolproof job description? That's what the question I get from just about everybody. Well, a foolproof job description is very simple. It should leave absolutely no questions with the employee about what is expected of them when they enter our organization. It should also take away any questions or any doubt or any wonder from the internal team that's already there. The job description basically is a place to say, this is exactly what you're going to do every day. This is what is expected of you every day. And it's also a place to start ingraining culture into applicants and into candidates. We have a culture statement in every one of our job descriptions so that it's understood not just what you're going to do, but also how you're going to do it and what is going to be expected of the team around you. Setting those expectations early really, really helps. Step 2 is building a pro. We use predictive index at Radius, so their tools for defining what a applicant should look like is called a pro. A pro is a profile of what the ideal applicant looks like from a behavior assessment standpoint. It's a huge tool for us. We update our pros on a regular basis after we've made hires so that we know exactly what the next hire in that position should look like. Third, just like everybody does, we build an ad or we build a call for talent. Everybody has their own way of doing that. There's ways that work for some companies, don't work for others, so on and so forth. But that's the next step in our process. Fourth, we assess our applicants with a PI survey and a candidate questionnaire. This is the next step of that pro. So now that in step 2, we figure out exactly what an ideal candidate is going to look like. And then in step 4, we actually are assessing each candidate once they've gone through an initial discovery, whether that's a first interview or an initial conversation. We give them that PI survey so we can see how they match up to that pro. But like I'm going to say it in the next slide, I have to iterate here that just because a candidate does not meet that pro exactly, that doesn't mean that they're a bad candidate. It just means that you're going to have to manage them differently and put a little bit more time into them in that role. But there's talent and experience to consider when making any hire. Having data, like we have with Predictive Index, gives us a chance to make better decisions. And as Michelle said, make less gut decisions, but actually make decisions based on data, which is just vital to success. Along with step 4, outside of just the PI survey, we also do a candidate questionnaire. It's similar to what probably anybody does, but with Radius, we have a lot of simple questions packed into one little questionnaire that takes very little time to answer, but it also gives us a lot of insights into the candidate that is interviewing. It's simple questions like, how would you rate yourself on creating content on a 1 through 5 scale? That's a question that, of course, if you're a writer, you're gonna be asked. But we ask that of every single one of our candidates, so that if you're coming in as an account manager, we want to make sure that you understand and have the skills necessary to come in at our company at the very bottom. So it's a unique hiring process and a unique set of tools that we get in advance of at least the second interview, so that we have a lot more data on the candidates when they come in the door, which of course leads to more in-depth interviews, more efficient, more effective interviews, which is step number 5. At Radius, we have a 3-step interview process. The first interview sometimes will happen before we do a PI assessment. Sometimes it happens after. But our first interview is a very quick, sometimes only 30 minutes, sometimes even only 15 minutes. And it's only a culture or chemistry check with our company. It's typically with just either myself or the manager of the service lines they're going to be coming in on. And it's simply, do we feel like you're going to be a great addition to this team? Do we feel like you're going to come in and join this really intense real-time work environment and be able to handle it? Will you be able to come in and handle it, but also be able to get the best out of the people around you? Those are some of the questions that we try to get out of that really short, simple interview, but kind of that simple question of, do we want to work with you every day? The second interview is more in-depth. That's typically with myself and maybe one other executive or maybe the manager of the service line. That's where we're finding out, can they do this job? Do they really want to do this job? It's a much more in-depth interview. And then finally, the third process, which brings in the millennials and how it's not just an opportunity to find talent, but it's also an opportunity to develop and retain talent within our company. We know that millennials want more power and control. They want to have more connection to what's happening with the company. So what we do is we reward millennials who not just millennials, but anyone on our team, but especially the millennials who are in lower positions and are trying to work themselves up. We include them in the third interview. So our team, our entry-level people, all the way up to our senior-most people, have an opportunity to weigh in on a hiring decision. It's a great opportunity for them to come in and have a first-hand knowledge of how decisions get made. Sometimes we'll have young and inexperienced people not really willing to speak up and say whether or not that candidate's a fit. But by the second time that they've been through the process, they're much more comfortable and they can weigh in and make those decisions, it's just a great development opportunity. And then finally, we move on to offer. So that's our 6-step hiring process. It's one that we use on every single hire. There's always a job description that we have that's finished. There's always a pro. There's always a PI survey, and there's always a 3-step interview process. There's obviously times where you want to skip those steps, but I can say we've had such an amazing success with retaining talent, especially in the millennial generation. That's very hard to nail down. But sticking to this process and making sure you get the right candidates from the very beginning will help retain them later on. Just a note, so we talked about the pros. This slide, if you see these are two different people, one on the left and one on the right. On the top left, you're looking at a pro for producer, producer 2.0. You don't have to know anything about predictive index to be able to see that the profile on the top and the person on the bottom are different. The shapes of these graphs are different. It's pretty simple. The person that we're looking at actually doesn't meet that producer profile at all, but this happens to be one of our best performing millennials, happens to be one of our best performing people in the entire company who work their way into this producer role, and through a lot of management, through a lot of ongoing support, has essentially built themselves into an irreplaceable member of the team who has a ton of freedom and autonomy and a ton of decision-making ability, because they were able to adapt and able to listen to coaching and able to look within themselves to say, they're not perfectly built for this role from a behavior assessment standpoint, but if they pay attention to those things and they manage themselves and they listen to their managers, they can work their way up and be great at it. So this is a perfect example of performance over PI here on the left. If you look at on the right side, you'll see a pro for a production artist. And if you look on the bottom, you can see that it's actually very similar between profile and pro. This person came into the company and was the completely ideal situation. This person came in and interviewed as a designer and has worked their way up and turned themselves into our best designer, but also as one of our best production creatives, period. Become a leader within the team. So this shows where on one side there's a lot of coaching and management that goes into it, but ultimately we were able to have a successful person, a successful employee. On the right, you can see where our process worked to a T, and we were able to easily bring in somebody who met the profile and has performance-wise met every expectation put in front of them and exceeded a lot of those. So this is a good visualization of behavior assessment in millennials and putting people in the right role, or maybe putting people in a role that may not be perfectly built for them, but management and coaching them along the way to get them there. So just a quote to wrap up the hiring section from Tina Fey that I love when it comes to managing millennials, but pretty much managing anybody, but especially the millennial generation. In most cases, a good boss means hiring talented people and then getting out of their way. With millennials, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for real-time feedback, which we're going to talk about in management, but really ultimately they want to be able to do their job well and not have to go through a bunch of corporate hoops in order to get there. So some key takeaways from hiring. You can't have a pro or anything else without a solid job description. I can't say that enough. I highly recommend anyone who is going through a hiring process to stop and take a look at the job description and make sure it answers every single question that you could possibly think of if you were going to be taking that job. It doesn't answer everything that you would want to know before you would accept a new position. Second, involve your team in the hiring process, especially millennials. If you're going to be adding people to your team, it doesn't matter if it's a huge, large corporation or a small company like us of 20. Allowing millennials to make decisions and to have a say in the hiring process just leads them to feel more confident, more comfortable, and it leads to more staying power. It leads to them wanting to stay and help develop those people that are coming in. And finally, performance over PI or performance over any assessment tool that you use. We rely so heavily on predictive index and behavior assessment, but at the same time, it's a powerful tool that you have to understand how to use, and you have to be willing to seek help. From our perspective, I've been a power user of predictive index for years, but it's not below me to call our rep to ask questions and to get help, and that's something that everybody should be looking to do. So the next step in outside of just hiring is how do we manage millennials? How do we manage an entire generation? Because we're starting to see Gen Y traits in some Gen Xers at Radius, as we have so many Gen Ys that it's starting to kind of seep through the rest of the organization, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. From my perspective, the millennials are a very powerful generation. They are hardworking, they are unique, they can be tough to manage, but at the same time, a lot of amazing things will come out of this generation as long as they're managed properly. So how do we use predictive index? How do we use behavior assessment in management when it comes to millennials? We use it in these different ways. We use it having to make difficult decisions. So when we're having to maybe move somebody into a different role, or we're having to make a new hire, or we're having to make a tough management decision, looking at our predictive index data, we are able to not just make those decisions a little bit easier, but also communicate them, which I can't emphasize enough, the value that behavior assessment can help you with when it comes to communicating what you're actually, the decisions that you're actually making, especially with the millennial generation that likes to be communicated to very differently than other generations. Establishing small teams. This is something that Dan mentioned. When it comes to establishing small teams, or the next one, establishing creative teams, pairing the right, not just generational people together, but pairing the right behavior groups together, so that you know that when you're putting two people together, not just from a generational perspective, but also from a behavioral perspective, how they're going to work together. We know for a fact that if you pair a Gen X person with a Gen Y person, it's going to be a positive experience for both. But if you add in the fact that you put the right Gen X person with the right Gen Y person, and now you've got something pretty powerful. That's something that we use every day. We like to create small teams. We're a group of 20, but we're also a group of, that has to move very quickly. So 20 can seem like a million people within an organization when you're having to create content, or you're having to do design, or you're having to do video work, you're having to respond to client needs in real time the way that our agency does. It leads to a unique management challenge and a unique challenge for all of our staff, especially our millennials. So creating smaller teams makes gives more people a little bit of ownership, and it creates a more flat organization, which we're trying to do at all times. That benefits millennials, but it benefits just about everybody when you create that flat organization. Employee reviews. Dan mentioned in employee reviews that the annual review is starting to go out of style. At Radius, we've never done annual reviews. We actually do biannual reviews. So we do them twice a year. Every 6 months, you have a review at Radius. And along the way, we're talking about what's leading up to those reviews. So these reviews are bigger milestones instead of something that you look forward to, and it's this massive thing that comes up every year, every 2 years in more traditional organizations. It's something that's a little bit smaller, but it's something that you get all of the feedback that you've been given for 6 months. We're going to sit down and we're actually going to assess what you've done with those things and set up goals for the next 6 months that we'll also follow up on in real time. So it's something that we noticed that it's incredibly important for millennials to be given real-time feedback. or else you'll start to get things like, well, I wasn't told that, or we talked about that 6 months ago. So many things have changed. You need to remind me of those things. And so that's kind of feedback that you get from this generation, that you have to be more real time. You have to be at the same time you have to balance that without always looking over their shoulder. It's a very demanding thing to do. But at the same time, if you do it right, if you provide enough autonomy with enough management, you're going to have extremely effective, happy, positive, and productive millennial employees. And finally, using predictive index for us has been huge in teaching less experienced people how to manage people and to manage clients. I mentioned earlier that we have millennials that are in leadership positions within our company that are leaders for our clients, that are leaders for our team. We have millennials who have people on their team that are drastically older than they are. But the problem with that is, with millennials, is they come in and they have an amazing understanding of technology. They usually come in and are already fairly decent at their role and are developed very quickly into excellent team members. The next step, and something that they're just too experienced to be super comfortable with, is managing people and managing clients. Using predictive index, it cuts the workload from my perspective and from my end in half. Being able to give them data that says, this is how you're built, this is how your team is built, and this is how your client is built. These are the things that you need to pay attention to when communicating with them. These are the things that you need to pay attention to make sure that these behaviors that can come off as negative don't come out, full bore in a client situation or a meeting situation. It gives actual data and proof. It's not just coming in and saying, you're a really controlling person, and it comes off as some kind of negative connotation. Instead, you can go into those situations and say, you're a very powerful person who likes having control. You have to remember that in a situation when you're trying to manage more sensitive employees. It's an incredibly powerful tool for things like that. So another quote to kind of wrap up what we're talking about with management. Management is above all a practice where art and science and craft meet. This is from Henry Mintzberg. This is a quote that I absolutely love, because I hear so many times from people who, I had this gut feeling, so I went and did this with an employee, and I turned out to be completely wrong. I hear that from colleagues all the time. Adding something like behavior assessment gives you the ability to add that science into management. It's just in this day and age, with as many dynamic things that are happening in the workforce and in the workplace, with all of these, with a generation retiring and a new generation coming in that's very aggressive, having the ability to have science and data to help you with decision making when it comes to people is just ridiculously powerful. It's something that I can't emphasize enough if you're not doing it today. So some key takeaways from this: behavior assessment is a management tool, and like all tools, it needs to be used when appropriate, and it needs to be used the way it's meant to be used. It can turn into a weapon. It can turn into something, a crutch that you lean on. So I encourage anyone who's using behavior assessment to revisit it on a regular basis and relearn it, and make sure that you're always advancing yourself with these tools that are incredibly powerful. But if you become lackadaisical in the way that you use them, it's going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt your employees. It's going to hurt your company. I think all great managers come from working around other great managers. Especially, I couldn't emphasize this more when it comes to millennials. The only way millennials will turn into great managers is to put them around and give them access to great managers. Similar to what Dan said, we try to give our team as much access to myself and to the other C-suite members at Radius as possible, so that there's a conversation that's easily had, there's mentoring that's easily had at all times for our younger staff. And these tools can help you predict behavior, but more often than not, you can only affect what your team knows and not what they do. So when we're talking about behavior assessment, when I talked about bettering yourself and making sure if you're using behavior assessment, going back and staying current with it, the same goes for your team. You can't affect in the heat of a situation, in the middle of the war, and you have guns blazing in a client situation that's just crazy, you can't always affect what that team member is going to do when they're in that situation without you, but you can prepare them for it. You can have them ready for it, so that they make the right decisions and that they're using the tools around them. And from my perspective, using behavior analysis and using predictive index has been huge in making sure that our team, and as we grow, we've had so many more people become client-facing, making sure that those people are ready for those situations when it's difficult walking into a meeting and dealing with maybe a CEO or a C-suite member that within a client situation that they weren't maybe ready for in that situation, but they walk in and they've been properly trained, they have the tools around them to succeed, and they're able to be confident in those situations. That goes for any employee, but especially millennials. Well, that is it for me, so I want to thank everybody for taking the opportunity to sit here and listen to me talk for a little bit, so very much appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I want to thank our other panelists, Dan and Michelle, for sharing such a great insightful story and context in and around millennial generation at work. So again, thank you, and of course thanks to PI Worldwide.